Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: more than 1 million people in Gaza now struggling with catastrophic hunger, according to a United Nations-backed report which warns famine is imminent. Our other headlines: Qatar says there's cautious optimism over an Israeli-Hamas ceasefire deal as an Israeli negotiating team remains locked in talks in Doha. The climate crisis is the defining challenge facing humanity. The conclusion of a new report that shows records broken in every climate measurement last year. And China's foreign minister arrives in Australia following a visit to New Zealand aimed at stabilising trade ties. The United Nations says Israeli restrictions on aid entering Gaza could amount to a war crime. This comes as the United Nations-backed IPC partnership says the entire population of Gaza is now facing crisis levels of food insecurity or worse. More than 1 million people, half the population, are said to have exhausted their food supplies and are struggling with catastrophic hunger and starvation. The report says famine is imminent in northern Gaza, where around 300,000 people are living. 1 in 3 children under 2 in northern Gaza are now actively malnourished, which can lead to irreversible brain and nerve damage. And the report goes on to say at least 2 in every 10,000 people are dying each day from starvation, malnutrition or disease. It adds that an immediate ceasefire could improve the situation and allow aid deliveries.
Things are changing. We're getting a little bit more access, but it is not enough. We need sustained access. We need quick access. We need enough aid coming in. And if all of those things happen, then this famine, both in the north, can be averted, in the south and in the center, can be averted. But time is of the essence. We need access now so that we can help literally thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people.
Let's talk to our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Rafah. Akram, what are you seeing in terms of the food situation?
Well, you have said enough about that, and I could hear also the UN figures also saying many things about that situation. A humanitarian catastrophe that is continuous, and it seems that the international community is not able to stop that deterioration. The food supplies that were entering Gaza, even the open arms ships that was supposed to be delivered to the people in North Gaza, was not allowed to go to Gaza North. It was asked by the Israeli army that communicated with the local supplier and asked the local supplier to send all the 200 tons to some warehouses not far away from our place, which is in the very south of Rafah. So people continue to suffer. And even in Rafah area, the general population in Gaza needs around 800 to 1,000 truckloads a day. The average truckloads that are entering Gaza every day are around 140 up to 200, which is not sufficient. Also, the quantities that are allowed into Gaza are selected by the Israeli occupation, which means the people are getting water more than they're getting food. People are getting non-food items more than they're needing the food for their life. So the situation is extremely catastrophic, and every single development in relation to that particular controversial issue is indicative of the fact that Israel is using, indeed, the starvation as one of the arms of weapon against the people of Gaza. This is what has been said by the Gazans. This is what has been said by the UN different figures, and this is what has been observed by experts in the nutrition and also in conflicts in the modern days. So the situation is more than just catastrophic. It is inconceivable, and it continues to deteriorate.
Do we know any more about these 14 people killed in strikes in Rafah?
The actual number is 15 people who are killed in a strike in Rafah. That strike targeted around 4 different houses in 4 different areas. 4 people were killed in one place, 2 other people were killed in another place, 3 other people were killed in another place, and then 3 more were killed in another attack. This is indicative of the intensification of the bombardments in Rafah area, and this is also in line with a general trend or a general tendency in Gaza that features heavy and intensified bombardment everywhere. A couple of hours ago, a house was targeted in Gaza area, Gaza Al-Mina area, an area that has been seeing and experiencing large-scale ground operation around Al-Shifa area. There are some unconfirmed reports about the killing of more than 30 people, and we are still waiting for the news to confirm the number of people dead and the number of people injured. So the bombardment is continuous in Rafah and all over the Gaza Strip, and it's likely to increase the number of people killed and injured.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Rafah. Well, pressure is growing on Israel to allow more aid into Gaza, although it denies obstructing access into the enclave. South Africa has asked the International Court of Justice to issue emergency orders allowing in more humanitarian supplies. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, what's been Israel's response to these proposed aid measures?
Israel is calling on the ICJ not to issue these emergency measures, calling them morally repugnant, saying it has real concern for the humanitarian situation and the innocent lives on the ground. Israel says it remains committed to the observance of its international legal obligations, And we did hear from government spokesperson Eylon Levy with regards to this aid situation. He insists that there is no limit to the amount of aid that can enter Gaza from Israel, blaming it on the United Nations, saying that it has failed to create an efficient distribution mechanism. But what we are hearing from these aid groups is that famine is imminent in the northern part of the Strip, saying that people there are suffering from catastrophic levels of hunger.
Meanwhile, the diplomatic shuttle continues with the United States top diplomat Antony Blinken heading to the Middle East again. What's on his agenda?
Well, this trip certainly comes amid this growing rift between Israel and Washington. It is important to point out that every other trip that Blinken has embarked on since October 7, he has made a visit to Israel. There is not one planned for this trip, although that is not to say that it will not happen. Now, he will meet the leaders of Saudi Arabia and also Egypt to discuss this imminent ceasefire, or the need for an imminent ceasefire. Also, of course, this growing humanitarian situation on the ground. Here's Blinken a little earlier.
According to the most respected measure of these things, 100% of the population in Gaza is at severe levels of acute food insecurity. That's the first time an entire population has been so classified.
We do know that these ceasefire negotiations are ongoing in Doha. Qatar's foreign ministry coming out to say it is cautiously optimistic, and we can confirm that there will be a war cabinet meeting held here in Israel this evening after the head of the Israeli delegation, the Mossad leader David Barnea, arrived back a little earlier today.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. The defining challenge facing humanity, that's the World Meteorological Organization's latest assessment of the global climate crisis. It says records were broken in every single climate indicator last year, from temperatures to sea levels. Our correspondent Jen Copestake reports.
There isn't much positive news to take away from the 2023 Global Climate Report from the WMO. It confirms last year was the warmest ever on record, with the average global temperature hitting around 1.45 degrees higher than the pre-industrial average. Concentrations of the three main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, all reached record highs, while Antarctic sea ice cover reached an absolute record low, 1 million square kilometers below the previous record low. Glaciers in Switzerland lost 10% of their remaining volume, and around the world, the global set of reference glaciers had the largest loss of ice on record, with Europe and North America particularly affected. Many of these factors contributed to rising sea levels, with the levels from the past decade having doubled on the previous 10 years measured. And ocean heat levels were the highest since records began 65 years ago. Several extreme weather events linked to climate change are specifically mentioned. Extreme heat affected large parts of the world, with wildfires in Europe, Hawaii, and Canada causing widespread damage and an increase in air pollution. Exceptionally heavy rainfall, particularly from Mediterranean cyclone Daniel, affected Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Libya. The storm caused devastation in the Libyan city of Derna in September when 2 dams broke, killing at least 4,000 people. The report speaks about the impact climate change has on socioeconomic factors too, including increasing food insecurity and population displacement of the world's most vulnerable people. The WMO says it is dedicated to increasing collaboration with the international community to try and meet the enormity of these challenges. Jen Copestake, CGTN.
And more from Jen in just a few moments. Let me tell you, though, that air pollution is worsening globally, with the majority of countries failing to meet standards set by the World Health Organization. The Swiss Air Quality Monitor, IQAir, says only 7 out of the 134 countries meet the guideline limits of PM2.5 for these tiny airborne particles that can cause health problems when inhaled. Well, the top 3 most polluted countries last year were all in Asia, with Bangladesh first, followed by Pakistan and India. And it found that human activity, mainly by burning fossil fuels, plays a pivotal role in influencing air pollution levels. Well, let's talk to Jen Copestake, whose report you heard just a few moments ago. So even wealthy countries are struggling to make progress in terms of cutting air pollution.
Yes, indeed. I mean, countries that you might not traditionally think of as being heavy polluting countries, like Canada, was shown to be a major polluter last year. And this is because of major climactic event like we saw in that report. So from the WMO, there were wildfires in Canada between May and October last year, which led to an increase in air pollution. And that didn't just affect Canada, but the air pollution traveled south and was very much affecting the results from the United States as well. And we saw that China, so for 5 years, China had seen a decline in its air pollution, but last year, because of more economic development after the COVID pandemic, saw a 6.5% rise in the PM2.5 levels there.
I mean, it must be said, this report makes for pretty grim reading. Are there any bright spots? Is there any good news in this?
Again, China was highlighted in the report as being a bright spot because in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of progress made in the quality of air in China. So that was highlighted as something that was positive. There was a couple of countries that did well. Chile, for example, also suffered from wildfires, but had a 15% decrease. South Africa, similar numbers, and the Philippines as well. And I think it's important that people are becoming more aware of the effect of air pollution. So there's a rise in kind of people, individuals looking into collecting data on this, and that will help inform these surveys in the future in areas that we can't reach to understand the quality of air around the world. Jen, thank you very much for that. Our correspondent, Jen Copestake, thank you. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, trash to treasure, the unsung heroes in South Africa, salvaging reusable waste thrown into landfill.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. More than 1 million people in Gaza are now struggling with catastrophic hunger, according to a United Nations-backed report which warns that famine is imminent. Our other headlines: the climate crisis is the defining challenge facing humanity. The conclusion of a new report that shows records broken in every climate measurement last year. China's foreign minister says Beijing is ready to upgrade a free trade agreement with New Zealand. Wang Yi visited the country before flying to Australia. Our correspondent Li Juanhua spoke to the former New Zealand Prime Minister, John Key, who says both sides want to improve relations.
Having Foreign Minister Wang Yi here is, I think, a really important milestone for the relationship. It's a great sign that the relationship is in very, very good. You know, I think New Zealand and China have enjoyed great relations over many, many decades, but like all relationships, they require work and they require goodwill and understanding on both sides.
And during the visit, Wang Yi has called for joint efforts to upgrade the China-New Zealand free trade agreement, hold talks on reducing barriers to investment, especially in the service sector, amongst others. So, in what areas do you think the two parties can work together to boost their economic growth?
This is probably one of the most comprehensive free trade agreements. So again, under my government, we negotiated the free trade agreement with all parts of One China. New Zealand has long been a tremendous supplier of very high quality food and agricultural products to China, and they've been extremely popular. So, you know, for instance, infant baby formula has been welcomed and endorsed by Chinese mothers for a very long time, and it's been a $5 billion market. I mean, something like kiwi fruit, it's the most significant counterpart for our national grower, Zespri.
How do you perceive the balance between the economic benefits and broader geopolitical considerations in shaping New Zealand's approach to its relationship with China?
Well, the huge advantage of free trade and having that in common is it gives you a platform to talk about all parts of the relationship. Some areas we agree, some we may have areas where we may well disagree, but that's not unique to New Zealand-China relations. I mean, New Zealand, for instance, was the first country that recognised China as a free trade market and supported its ascension to the WTO. So I think, you know, much is made of areas where maybe we have discussion or we don't always agree. That's true, but actually a healthy relationship is one where you can discuss those on both sides.
And New Zealand is part of the Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing Alliance. And do you think New Zealand, at least the current government, is moving closer to the so-called second pillar of AUKUS?
Look, I'm not convinced that they do. You know, that is in the area of debate and discussion. But, you know, I think New Zealand's enjoyed being part of the Five Eyes and should continue to be because, you know, as a very small country, we're a significant beneficiary from the intelligence that we gather in that area. You can't expect, and no one would really expect us to have the capacity to do all those things on our own. And that's true in the relationship with China, where they're important to us. And as I said, where actually real positive change occurs when you have honest but dialogue that takes place in a normalised way where it's not fractious.
Well, Wang Yi's visit to Australia is expected to focus on resolving a number of trade disputes between the two countries. Our correspondent Greg Navarro reports.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi arrives here in Canberra late Tuesday from New Zealand. His two-day visit here in Australia will include meetings with several Australian officials, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. He'll also meet with business leaders. And he will take part in the China-Australia Foreign and Strategic Dialogue with his Australian counterpart, Foreign Minister Penny Wong. They will undoubtedly talk about stabilizing trade ties between the two countries. Now, China's government has signaled that those very high tariffs it's placed on Australian wine will soon be lifted. Those tariffs, by the way, decimated the industry that was once worth an estimated $1 billion in exports to China alone. There are some Australian beef processors as well as Australia's lobster industry who also still face some tariffs and trade blockages. They'll be watching these meetings very closely, hoping for a very similar and positive outcome. Wang Yi then heads to Sydney on Thursday for a couple of meetings, including one with Australian former Prime Minister Paul Keating. Now, Keating has been a very outspoken critic of the AUKUS trilateral agreement that will see Australia acquire nuclear-powered submarines relying on U.S. technology with assistance from the UK. China also opposes that deal as well. Keating said of his upcoming visit that it was an unexpected invitation. He also reaffirmed his support for Australia's government in its attempts to stabilize trade relations with its biggest trading partner. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Canberra.
Gang violence in Haiti has spread to a wealthy suburb of the capital, Port-au-Prince, where at least 10 people have now been killed. Witnesses say attacks were carried out by masked gunmen. Gunfire and looting was also reported, and electricity generating equipment stolen, causing power cuts. A transitional council to replace the Prime Minister, Ariel Henry, is still being finalised. The Ukraine Defence Contact Group has announced $540 million of support for Ukraine to help combat Russia. Germany's defence minister said the latest package from the 56-country alliance will start being delivered this year, including 100,000 rounds of ammunition. Boris Pistorius also said the group has no plans to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. The European Union is reportedly preparing to impose tariffs on grain imports from Russia and Belarus following weeks of protest by farmers. Duties of 50% could be put on Russian oilseeds and their products. European farmers are angry about increased environmental regulations and the waiving of customs duties on Ukrainian imports. The tariffs would be the first on Russian food products since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. It's Global Recycling Day, which this year is highlighting recycling waste so it can be resold and reused. In South Africa, waste sorting now provides jobs for tens of thousands of people who save tons of reusable material from going to landfill. Our correspondent Julie Shire reports.
The sun has barely risen, but waste reclaimers are out on the streets of Johannesburg with their trolleys collecting trash from bins. Luyanda Halatshawayo from the African Reclaimers Organization, who started out as a recycler 12 years ago, oversees this group.
We look for recyclable materials that have value, plastics, paper, steel, anything that has value that I can be able to resell, I collect it. An average reclaimer collects about 150 to 200 kilograms a day. Traveling distances of about 40 kilometers, 25 to 40 kilometers a day, to and fro. Very strenuous for a job.
Just 10% of the 122 million tons of rubbish generated by South Africans every year is recycled. The rest goes to landfill, which thousands of waste pickers help prevent.
Whatever is missed in the bins, there's guys at the landfill waiting. I call them the last line of defense. We make sure no plastic, anything, goes into the landfill. We've saved the landfills in Johannesburg a lot of lifespan. They were supposed to be closed by now. If all 90,000 of us decided not to collect for a week, all landfills would be closed.
ARO is trying to change the lives of waste pickers with a stable income and better working conditions. Like most, Cecilia Beko turned to the informal sector because there were no jobs. She recently joined ARO as a full-time sorter.
In the dam site, we work it's hard, because when it rain, we got there. When it's hot, we got there. Here it's different. Here we look difference with the reclaimers in the dam site, because here we have a shelter over us and they pay us.
These are the heroes boosting South Africa's recycling rates. Yet there is little regard for the important work done by these men and women.
We've managed to sustain livelihoods through saving the environment. And all that is important for us is to be recognized and not be undermined. Instead of judging us, rather ask. Instead of hooting on the side of the road, why don't you just allow me to pass because I'm carrying your waste? We are fathers, we are mothers. We are trying to provide for our families. So before swearing at us, consider that.
Despite the urgent need to increase recycling rates, South Africa still has a long way to go. Most rubbish is collected through the municipal waste management system and dumped at landfills, which are fast running out of space. Julie Shire, CGTN, South Africa.
The headlines again. More than 1 million people in Gaza are now struggling with catastrophic hunger. That's according to a United Nations-backed report, which warns that famine is imminent. Our other headlines: the climate crisis is the defining challenge facing humanity. The conclusion of a new report that shows records broken in every climate measurement last year. And China's foreign minister arrives in Australia following a visit to New Zealand aimed at stabilising trade ties. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to Europe's weather forecast. Well, by Wednesday, you could see scattered rainfall across Iberian Peninsula, much of UK. Moving to northern Europe, some winter precipitation could be expected. From Belarus, Ukraine, all the way down to the Balkans, there could be light rain. Then getting into Thursday, the rainfall will be stretching from much of Iberian Peninsula into France, Germany, Poland. Northern Europe stretching into northwestern Russia could continue to have sleet or snowy weather. You better take some precautions. Now, talking about the maximum temperatures, around 5 for daily highs across northern Europe and much of the east over the next 2 days. If you're living across central Europe, a daily highs forecast to be in lower or upper teens, and eventually for the west down to Iberian Peninsula, lower 20s could be expected. And your business and travel outlook by Thursday, you could see 16 to 8 for London, overcast sky, 21 to 8 in Paris, even warmer for majority showers, 26 to 7. And if you're living in the city of Lisbon, please keep your umbrellas handy because of rain chances, 22 to 12. Eventually over to Central Europe, Brussels, 17 to 5, overcast sky and showers in Berlin. Well, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more city forecast.